What is happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. It has been a little bit of time since we were on here. It's been a crazy couple of weeks if you follow me on social media. But of course, one of the biggest events in the calendar for One Championship is coming up very soon. 1168 at the Ball Arena in Denver. One's return to the US, their second event in the United States. And of course, the main event is the thing that everyone is excited about, right? I think, we're going to be putting out a decent amount of content on this card, and I do think there is some great stuff. But of course, the main event, I'm of course talking about Jonathan Haggerty defending his bantamweight Muay Thai title against Superlek. That is the one, that is the real dream fight that is on this card. Actually, I say that there's a couple of very, very good matchups here, but Haggerty and Superlek is the one that gets you really excited, especially if you're a striking fan already. And if you're not, then stay tuned for the preview, I guess, that I'll be dropping on this video because on this card, because it's an unbelievable fight, one of the best of the year in Muay Thai. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people know this already, especially if you're a striking fan and if you follow One Championship closely. But these guys have fought once before they were both in One Championship. That fight is available to go back and watch on YouTube. I will leave a link to that in the description, so you can go check that out for yourself. It took place, I believe it was Yokkao 31. It says on Haggerty's Wikipedia, I think, that it's Yokkao 31 and 32. I assume it was like a double bill event on the same day. It took place in England. Superlek obviously coming over to Haggerty's home territory there. And I hadn't seen it before, so I went back and watched it ahead of their rematch in One Championship, which of course a lot has changed in that time. That fight took place in 2018, so 6 years is a long time in combat sports, especially when you're looking at two fighters. 6 years is massive for a fighter's career. So a lot has changed. So I thought it'd be interesting to go back and watch this one and kind of give you the main takeaways if you haven't seen it either. And maybe if you have seen it and you haven't revisited it in a while. The first thing to really kind of point out, and it's immediately obvious, while Superlek doesn't look like he's aged that much in 6 years, Haggerty certainly has. Not in a bad way, but you can just tell how young he is from the minute you click on this video. I mean, he was 21 at the time, which frankly, I mean, Jonathan Haggerty's 1 year older than me, which is frankly absurd. But it is what it is. And that's kind of the story, I think, of this fight and this video that I am recording right now, is that the clear story of this fight is that Haggerty clearly has potential at 21 years old, and the commentary do make a point of saying, this is the level that he will be at in a few years' time, but maybe it was just too soon for him at this stage. Superlek at this point 6 years ago is already one of the best in the world. And whilst you can, he definitely hasn't regressed in 6 years. I wouldn't say that the Superlek you now see, has aged poorly or anything like that. He's been able to maintain that level, if anything. I would say, improve in a lot of areas as well. Which just speaks to how good he is, right? I mean, you look at his recent wins. He's beaten Takeru, Kongtorni, and Rodzang in his last 3, not in that specific order, but that is remarkable. And some of those fights, the Kongtorni one in particular, I don't think he was particularly, pushing himself to the limit. Which you would expect from a guy that's as good as Superlek, but still. So yeah, the first round of this fight, first of all, I wasn't expecting the music. Maybe that's on me because before, doing this channel and things like that, wasn't super, engrossed in the world of Muay Thai. I'd watched quite a bit of kickboxing, but not so much Muay Thai. So the music during the rounds is something I wasn't expecting. And I don't know how, I guess if you're there, it's different, right? It's part of the atmosphere, but watching it, on YouTube and stuff like that, man, it's so distracting. I'm sure it's a cool atmosphere when you're there, and I'm sure that it's, a traditional thing. So I'm not going to, say that I'm not going to come into Muay Thai and be like, they should ban it or whatever. But yeah, God, it's so hard to concentrate on the fight when that's going on. But either way, first round, I mean, as you can kind of expect from this style of Muay Thai. I think, if you look through the YouTube comments, there's a lot of people complaining about how boring this fight is and stuff like that. And that, is probably one championship fans coming over to this and watching this back because, the style of Muay Thai that you get in one championship isn't the style of Muay Thai that you get across the board. And this fight, of course, happening in Yokkao, is very different to how their rematch will be. In terms of the first round, it's a very traditional Muay Thai feeling out process. It's mostly kicks for the most part. Superlek goes for a couple of blitzes. It's a very, very competitive round, actually. Haggerty lands some really nice kicks. And I think, there's probably an argument for him taking that first round. I think Superlek probably, does win it, but it's very, very close. Again, as you can kind of expect from an opening round of Muay Thai to some degree. The second round is really where Superlek pulls ahead. He does open up a cut above Haggerty's left eye, I want to say it is, off the top of my head. And this is where Superlek, starts to take over. And this is something that you see a lot in Haggerty's career. And I think one of the things that makes this rematch so interesting is at this point, Superlek has a lot of success against Haggerty in the same way that Rodtang did when Rodtang fought Haggerty in those back-to-back absolute classics in one, where Haggerty is super competitive with them at range, but when they're able to close that distance on him and cause a little bit of chaos, is kind of where he becomes a little bit unglued. He tends to, rather than sticking to playing the long range game and keeping himself safe and creating that distance again, he tends to trade a little bit. Sometimes gets a little bit reckless. Not necessarily in terms of his technique and stuff like that, but just throwing back and trying to counter when maybe it's not the best idea. And that's kind of where Superlek has a lot of success in this second round, is which is crazy because he's the kicking machine, right? His kicks are absolutely phenomenal, but Haggerty is able to kind of keep up with him in this field. It's only when Superlek starts to go more for the forward aggression, more blitzes, and kind of starts to push Haggerty around a little bit. Which again, like I said, that's why I think this second fight is so interesting, and why watching this first fight has only made me more excited for the rematch, even though Superlek won that fight. And I'm sure a lot of people will be picking Superlek to win this one again because he's so good. This one made me a lot more interested to see what changes Haggerty is able to make, because not only has he gone up to bantamweight, of course, Superlek will be going up to bantamweight as well. And while Superlek has never been a particularly small flyweight anyway, so I don't expect there to be a huge size difference, it did take Haggerty some time to kind of really adapt to being a bigger fighter, being a bantamweight. You saw that in his first bantamweight fight against Vladimir Kuzmin, where he didn't look anywhere near as good as he did against Nongo or Fabricio Andrade or Felipe Lobo, which were his following fights at bantamweight. I'll quickly pull up his record actually so that you can see this for yourself. Where are we? There you go. So yeah, as you can see, the three most recent wins at bantamweight have been far better than the win over Kuzmin, which was at one on Prime Video 4. That was his bantamweight debut, where he won the majority decision. But you can just see that Haggerty has had some time to build into this bantamweight frame, and I think he looks a lot better for it. So that's really interesting, because Superlek had success when he was able to bully him a little bit and kind of push him around, and that's what Rodtang was able to do again. Close the distance on him. Body shots were a huge thing. Whilst I still do think that there's potentially a vulnerability there from Haggerty, you saw that in the Felipe Lobo fight. He was hurt in that fight and he had to battle through it. But the important thing is he did battle through it. Felipe Lobo is a powerful guy, and he hurt Haggerty. Haggerty had to take a knee, but he managed to battle back through it. And whilst he still did, do the thing that I was kind of saying that he did in this first fight with Superlek, which is maybe trade a little bit recklessly when he doesn't need to, he did it in this fight a lot. This fight against Felipe Lobo, his last outing at One Fight Night 19, and was able to just wear Lobo down and take his best shots and come out on top in that. And so that's where this first fight, and going back and watching this, I think is really interesting going into the second fight, because Haggerty was able to kind of hold his own against Superlek at range, and Superlek only had success when he was able to close that distance on him and all of these things. Will Superlek be able to do that against a potentially bigger, most likely bigger, much stronger Haggerty, a much more powerful Haggerty as well. This is something they said on commentary during the first fight, is that, and they actually compared Haggerty to Liam Harrison in this regard, in that when a lot of the Thai specialists come over and stuff like that, the guys like Liam Harrison and stuff, maybe they can't go technique for technique with them, maybe speed for speed or whatever, but they tend to have a deterrent. They tend to have that power that maybe some of the Thai guys don't have. And that kind of levels the playing field to some degree. And Haggerty at this stage, at 21 years old, competing at flyweight, didn't really have that. He didn't really have power throughout the majority of his run at flyweight. That's not to say that he doesn't have power, but he was, competing at flyweight and draining himself to make that weight. And at bantamweight, in these last three fights, again, his last three performances at bantamweight, which have been his best ones, he's finished all three opponents, right? He stopped Nongo, dropped in with a beautiful shot. He managed to hurt Fabricio Andrade and then pour on the pressure to get the finish. And Felipe Lobo, again, his power was clear to see in that fight, and also his finishing ability, which you would imagine has come a long way in these past 6 years. So it makes it really, really interesting for me. I'm super excited to see how this rematch goes. It's a dream fight anyway, but I would recommend that you go back and watch this first fight. And, if you've got the time, go back and watch the last few performances from Haggerty, because I do think there is some signs there that if you're going to argue for Haggerty in this fight, I do think there's some things you can pick up on to make you say, okay, well, how is Superlek going to deal with a physical, a more physical, a much more powerful, and a more confident Jonathan Haggerty, who believes that he belongs at this level, who has gone through the Rodtang wars, and kind of knows what he's made of at this point, and you saw that against Felipe Lobo. So it's super interesting. I hope that this video has at least provided some interesting thoughts for you to keep on your mind during fight week and all of that good stuff. Again, I'll be dropping a bunch of content ahead of 1168. Apologies, it's been a while. As I said, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, but we are back. And we are just a couple of weeks away from 1168 at the Ball Arena in Denver, September 6th. Thank you for checking out this video. I will see you all very soon, I am sure. If I don't, enjoy the fights.